I wanted to welcome you all again to our second webinar in our College Readiness and Management for Adults series. And today I'm excited to be joined by my expert colleagues and webinar regulars, Dr. Amy Dietzman, Henry Price, and Rachel Eckman. So without further ado, I'll pass it on over to them.
All right, thank you so much. Happy to be here again to talk a little bit about college readiness. So let's get started. Welcome to the series. Last week, we presented on the college decision. It included how to determine if college is right for you, what different fields of study require, and how to research a little further to find the right path. If you missed it, you can find it on our YouTube page, which we will share at the end of this presentation. Next week, we will share the college experience, which is going to be more about what you can expect as an adult learner, things like where to find resources that you need, how to schedule your time and balance all of your responsibilities, and how to work with your classmates. And then for those who are ready to think about life after college, how to get a job in your new field, what employers are looking for, and more, then you can join the final webinar in our series, which will be on April 25th. So let's get started today on the college admissions process. So from this webinar today, we hope that we can help you plan for the application process, understand the typical college application, and discover some financial options for college. As we go through this presentation, Henry, Rachel, and I are going to share our own educational backgrounds with you to let you know a little bit more about what our traditional or maybe non-traditional experiences looked like, and maybe a little bit more about how we navigated those. So I'm Amy Dietzman. I had the very traditional college experience right out of high school. I moved out, lived in the dorm, did that whole thing. But later on, after getting married and having 2 kids, I discovered that my degree was not going to help me get into the field that I really wanted to be in. After researching and talking with an enrollment advisor, I determined that a master's in education was what I needed to become a teacher. So I went back to school full-time with 2 small children and got an online degree and then a teaching job. Not long into that teaching tenure, I realized I wanted to be a teacher leader, and that required, yet again, more education. So I researched and decided that to reach the highest possible potential in that field, I really needed a doctoral degree. So I enrolled in school yet again in a mostly online program with some in-person week-long intensives while working full-time, being a full-time wife and mother, still 2 fairly small children at the time. This was exhausting and required more discipline and commitment than I ever knew that I had. But I did it, and I graduated in 2015. So anybody can find a place in higher education. There is literally a place for everyone. Just a few things you should know about college that might dispel some of the myths that you may have heard over the years. Often we hear all about Ivy League colleges in the news. Those schools get a lot of attention, and admissions into those colleges is very competitive. But most colleges accept 50% or more of those who apply. In fact, many fully online colleges have open enrollment, which means that they accept everyone. That doesn't mean that their programs aren't still rigorous and valuable. It just means that they give everyone an opportunity to be a successful college student, regardless of their background. If you are concerned about an online school, make sure you check into their accreditation. And then non-traditional college students make up almost 75% of the students enrolled in higher education, which means students who have jobs, families, don't necessarily live on campus, attend distance programs or online classes like I did, or attend school part-time. This is also a large population of adult learners. So non-traditional really isn't non-traditional anymore. And lastly, we hear all the time about how the cost of college has increased exponentially over the past decade or 2, and that is very true. But so has the percentage of students who earn scholarships. So don't be too intimidated by what you hear. So, what has changed over the years in college? Well, I'm just going to talk about a few things you might not be aware of. New majors. Well, if it's been a while since you thought about going to college or you looked into college, it's quite different in terms of what you might find as options for majors. Think of all the technological advances and how that could influence careers. Students can study social media and communication strategies when it comes to fields like sales or marketing. New media is a major that explores media consumption on digital devices. Computer science has grown and changed and includes hot fields like cybersecurity, which is what my son actually is studying, and digital forensics. So there are many options out there and probably a lot of new things that you haven't even considered beyond just what we all know, English and communications and history. There's a lot of new majors. And then there's diverse and flexible content delivery. There are courses in just about every format that you can imagine nowadays. Courses that meet online for lectures and then meet in person for labs, completely asynchronously online where you just log in at your own time and do your work. Some classes just have a start date and you can complete that class at your own pace with no deadlines at all. So there are truly options for every type of learner with every type of schedule. And just about every course that you do take in college right now will have some kind of online component, whether you have a digital textbook or you turn your papers and assignments into an online Dropbox, or you're just required to participate in discussion boards. So be aware that there is an online component to almost everything nowadays. And then there's competency-based learning. This is a type of curriculum where students can use their experience to test out of certain modules and courses. And if they can pass the final course competency-based exam, they can pass the course. Now, this is a great advantage to adult learners who have worked in their field for a long period of time without a degree, and they have a lot of knowledge. So you may want to look into schools that have competency-based programs. And lastly is centralized curriculum. Many schools nowadays have courses designed by instructional designers who build the course based on very specific learning outcomes and where all instructors teach to the same course outline and utilize the same materials and the same final exams. This creates better consistency in schools where, like, if you remember back in the day, you used to hear that so-and-so got the super easy professor or the super easy teacher, and they seem to do nothing and they get an A, and then you work really hard in the same exact course, but you have a different professor or a different teacher and you end up getting a B. Well, that's a little less common these days because there's a little more consistency across the curriculum. So now I'm going to pass it over to Henry, and he's going to tell you a little bit about himself.
Hi, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you may be. Again, my name is Henry, and I am with Princeton Review Tutor.com and have been for almost 17 years now in a variety of capacities. Let me tell you how I got there. So I went the fairly traditional route, as in I graduated high school and went straight into college like Amy did and finished in 4 years. A little less traditional, maybe, in that I finished with a music degree and I didn't go into music. I ended up staying at my alma mater as an employee. And I figured while I'm here, I'll get a master's with a tuition discount. And it turned out to be a master's in educational technology. Now, that didn't directly lead to me getting a job with the Princeton Review, but I did start teaching for the Princeton Review a few years later and have been here in a wide variety of full-time and part-time capacities ever since. So you just never know what direction you might go and where it might lead you. What I want to talk about today, among a few other things, first is the application process. So if you are stressed out about this, I'm hoping I can help with that. It may feel a little overwhelming, right? You might feel a little bit like these ducks, as in there's so much to think about that it just becomes like a wall of information and you can't figure out even where to begin. Well, I'm going to take my cue from Amy and look at a few more things, in this case about the application process, that are going to be different for you than they might have been for had you gone the more traditional route in your day, or that current students in the more traditional routes are doing. Let's take a look. First thing to know is that if you are applying as a working adult, schools understand that. And they understand that as an adult learner, you are not the same as an incoming recent high school graduate. So the rules around that might be different. Adult-friendly programs exist, and they're built around the assumption that you're working. So that means you can take evening classes, weekend classes, and online courses in the event that that is the sort of thing that works around your work schedule. If you are available to take more traditional daytime classes, fantastic. You have options, and they will accommodate those options. Next thing to consider is that sources of financial aid are radically different for you than they might have been for you back in the day, and than they are for high school students entering college now. A lot of federal and other types of aid are in fact earmarked for kids coming out of high school, but you are eligible for some of it, and you're eligible for new things that high school kids are not. So do your research. We're going to talk a lot more about scholarships and financial aid in just a few minutes. Third thing that's different, it's unlikely, not impossible, that your SAT or ACT scores are still a factor in your admissions decision. Test scores are generally, and the rules will be different school to school, but generally not going to be required if you're over 25 and have some work experience. They're also not usually required if you have completed any college coursework in the past. So if you started college and then decided to take some time off, it is very unlikely that in getting back into it, they will ask you to submit your SAT and ACT scores. Always check to confirm. And hey, if your scores back in the day were pretty impressive, it wouldn't hurt to send them. So with those three big things, the application itself, and financial aid, at least you know kind of that there is some, and the fact that your SAT or ACT scores may not be a factor. Now that you've thought about that, hopefully like this mama duck, you feel a little bit more confident that they're in a row and you can get what you need. Let's take a look in a little more detail at the application itself. No matter what your student status is, you do have to fill out an application. And there are a lot of aspects to this. So rather than look at this as this unsolvable puzzle, because it is a lot, do yourself a favor, get organized and give yourself a timeline. The first thing, no matter where you're coming from, that will matter is your secondary school academics. That is your high school grades, which you will need to submit in the form of transcripts. You may have a copy handy. If not, your former high school or school district should be able to access those and forward them, even if you have not been in school for several years. Please note, a fee may apply to acquire those and forward them on to a college. The other record of your secondary school academics are test scores. And again, you probably don't even have to submit them, but if you do, here's how. If you took the SAT, you want to go to the College Board website on the screen. If you took the ACT, you want to go to their website that's on the screen. In either case, a fee, once again, might apply to forward those to colleges. So just be aware, you can do it. It might cost you a little bit of money. Post-secondary schools, that is to say, any college coursework that you've completed. If you have, the process is actually quite similar. If you have a copy of those transcripts, fantastic. If not, your former colleges should be able to access and forward them, even if it's been a few years. More importantly, and Rachel's going to spend a lot more time talking about this in a few minutes, if you did take prior coursework, you're going to want to talk to your former institutions as well as the ones you're applying to get the most comprehensive picture about your transfer units. You want to get as much credit for prior work completed as possible. And again, we'll return to that in just a few minutes. The third piece I want you to not forget about or just think of as a small box to check are letters of recommendation. They tend to be one of the most overlooked aspects of an application, but they can be used strategically to position you for admissions and scholarships. So let's take a look at how to maximize these. Job one, find reliable people who have good and unique things to say about you. By unique, I mean things that are not evident by looking at the other aspects of your application. So I'll give you an example. If you simply have your current supervisor fill out a recommendation, and that person says you show up to work on time and gives the start and end dates of your employment, they've learned very little about you. right? We basically knew when that job started because that was on your resume. And we know that you're doing a satisfactory job because you still have the job. That's not really a strong recommendation, is it? So you want to find somebody who has something unique to say about you that you don't get by looking at your transcripts and work history. The second thing you need to do is make that recommender's job easy. That means give them plenty of lead time. Remind them of all the great things they already know about you, but might not have at the top of their mind. And also give them specific instructions on how to submit those recommendations. They might need to be on the lookout for direct communication from the schools that you're applying to. Sort this out and know what they should expect before making the ask. They're much more likely to write you a strong recommendation if you set them up to do that. So please consider that before making those asks. Finally, as we've already talked about, the application itself will be a big piece of the puzzle. Most colleges in the country today accept what's called the Common App, and that's listed at the link right there. If you're not familiar, the Common App is a site where you can submit all of your information. So your high school records and your work history and your community service experience or whatever else they may be asking for in college applications one time. And then you let the Common App know which schools you would like them to forward all that information to, instead of filling it out over and over and over again when you go to the individual school websites. It will save you a ton of time. By the way, if you are applying to schools that are in Texas, by the way, Rachel and I both live in Texas. Like a lot of things, Texas likes to do our own thing. So there is something called Apply Texas, and that's the second link there. That's sort of Texas's own version of the Common App. Most schools in Texas take the Apply Texas application. They may not take the Common App. You're going to want to be sure which is which before you spend a lot of time doing something that ends up not being accepted. Of course, the best thing you can do is go to any school's website, and they'll either let you apply through the site directly or let you know they'll take Common App or Apply Texas. But keep in mind, just because you can fill it out on their website doesn't mean it's the most efficient thing to do, right? If they take Common App or Apply Texas, it's probably best to go that way. That way, when you apply to another school, a big chunk of the work is already done. They may also in the application require you to write an essay. May or may not be required. So first, double check, especially are the rules different for adult students? It may be that you don't even have to do this. If you do, then a bit like the letters of recommendation, give yourself a long runway, just like you would give your recommender some time to write a good one. Give yourself time to write a good essay and have it edited and proofread for you. Nobody's writing is perfect. It's never a bad idea to get a second set of eyes on that. Now, what is the point of an essay? Honestly, the questions will vary that you have to respond to, but at the end of the day, they're all about the same thing. An opportunity to tell the admissions committee something it doesn't already know about you. So again, you may remember some of the things I was saying about the letters of recommendation. The application essay is a story you can tell. It's a great opportunity to say, hey, this is why I'm passionate about getting back to school at this stage of life, if that's a story that you need to tell, because your transcripts and your work history are just facts, not reasons, right? Remember also that you're sending everything you see on the screen right now, all of your secondary and college stuff. You've got people sending recommendations. You're filling out information on the application itself. I'm not suggesting you won't be honest, but it can be hard to be consistent across all of those. So you want to make sure you've got all your dates right about your starting and ending for employment. You want to make sure that you have all the exact same facts listed everywhere. You do not want to have a potential college raise a red flag about your application because you accidentally gave them conflicting information in different parts of the puzzle. But again, the point of each of these 5 things is to tell them something different about you. Your high school academics tell part of the story. Your college academics, if you have them, tell part of the story. Your recommenders do, the essays do, and the information you put in the application does. All 5 of those things should be able to add unique value to your application. And if you can knock all of that out, then the puzzle will be done. Isn't that satisfying? All right, so I'm going to hand it over to Rachel now. and she's going to talk to you about ways to maximize your college experience.
Thanks, Henry. I may be the epitome of the non-traditional college student. When I first started my college experience, I was 18 years old, fresh out of high school, going to a community college, working full-time hours at a pizza place. Over the next 20 years, I attended a total of 5 different colleges and universities. I took college classes with varying levels of success during all 3 of my combat tours while I was in the military. I've transferred and applied college credits, military transcripts, CLEP courses, and life credits. I have paid cash. I have taken out student loans. I've used the GI Bill and vocational rehab. By the time I was in school finishing my bachelor's degree, I already had an associate's degree. I was teaching at a local technical college, working full-time hours at the college and then some. And I was also working freelance as a professional resume writer, teaching Sunday school every weekend. And I was a single foster mom with 2 kids, ages 9 and 11. So needless to say, things were a little bit crazy, but I have garnered so much experience from all of it. And the beauty of being an adult learner is that despite all of that crazy, you tend to learn a lot more than just what's in the curriculum. Something I learned over 20 years and a variety of extremely different and unique educational experiences is that you really can customize your education to meet your needs and get the most out of it that's possible. And one of the ways to do that is with electives. In higher education, the lackadaisical attitude we tend to have about electives is almost pretty tragic. You wouldn't go into a store with $100 to spend and only buy $75 worth of important things that you really need, and then just spend the rest on random stuff that just happened to have been available and easy to reach. Why would you use 25% of your money on things that you really don't care about or want? Well, taking a bunch of random electives without putting any serious thought into them is basically doing exactly that with a lot more than $25, I might add. So here are some things to consider when choosing your electives. Are you going back to college for a career transition? Career transition resumes are a very unique type of resume, and there are some specific needs that a good new college degree can help you to meet. Career transition resumes are built on a combination of relevant education, training, and crossover skills that are applicable in any industry. The electives you choose can then become an important part of the relevant coursework that boosts your resume. Specialized training will give you a competitive edge, even if you have a little less industry specific work experience in the field you're choosing to go into. And that concept is not just helpful for a career transition resume. Specialized training is always an asset. If you've gone back to school to be eligible for promotion, management, any other type of career advancement, you can customize your electives to meet those needs too. If you're going to do presentations, you can take a public speaking class. If you'll need to manage people, take a psychology course. If you'll need to do a lot of interactions via written and oral communication, take a communications class. You have the opportunity to take your electives to another level, and they can become a really powerful tool to enhance not just your college experience, but your career progression as well. So choose wisely. But electives aren't the only way to get the most bang for your buck. Pretty much everything about transfer credits will depend on the university to which you're transferring them. So you really need to engage your admissions department. Questions to ask may include, will you accept my transfer credits? How many will you accept? And how can they be applied? How will this impact my degree track? Ask for a couple of different degree analyses based on 1 or 2 different possible options. Here's what you would be looking at in terms of time and course needs without any transfer credits. And now, here's what your degree program will look like if you applied the credits in this way. And then here's what they would look like if you applied them in a different way. Don't be afraid to negotiate because transfer credits can make a huge difference. Transferring previous college is fantastic, but again, not your only option. As an adult student, you have, in some ways, more education than your traditional student peers. Your life experiences, professional experience, military service, credentials, and certifications are all part of an educational experience that takes place over the course of a lifetime. And just because they weren't attained sitting in a classroom doesn't mean they can't count toward your degree. What are life credits? One way to earn life credits, which are credits that the college will apply to your degree based on your life experiences that count toward your education. One way to apply for earn life credits is through prior learning assessments. This can sometimes be exams, or it can be a portfolio of experience that you'll compile with course specific documentation of relevant life and work experience. The requirements will vary from college to college, and they'll also be evaluated differently. So make sure to ask what your options are. For example, Penn State will give you up to 3 credits per portfolio. Thomas Edison State has no cap on the number of credits you can earn for one life credit portfolio. Liberty University has a program called the Experience Plus Evaluation, and they'll allow up to 30 credits for taking that evaluation. Life credit can shave tons of time and cost off your degree, so don't leave that on the table. Another option is college level examination program or CLEP courses. Those can take the place of an entire course requirement. When I was completing my bachelor's, I was able to take 2 CLEP exams, Microsoft certifications, and that met the computer science requirement of my degree. It saved me a lot of time and a lot of money. Professional licenses are also very valuable. Examples of licenses that can be transferred into credits include, but are not limited to, CPA, real estate, aviation, FAA, ASE, project management certification. There is no limit. Don't be afraid to ask, hey, I'm certified in underwater basket weaving. Can you apply this as an elective credit toward my degree? Defense activity for non-traditional educational support, which is a mouthful, which is why we shorten it to Dante's, and military transcripts are also great if you've got them. If you have served, make sure you include your joint service transcript and official copy in your application because you can be credited for anything from MOS training to correspondence courses, leadership training, sometimes even rank. The bottom line is you don't want to leave any possible credits on the table. If you've got it, find a way to use it because the more credits you start with, the less the degree will cost in time and in money. Which brings us back to Henry, who has some wonderful information for you on that.
Yeah, thanks again, Rachel. And yes, I'm here to talk about financial aid. How are you going to get through this college period of your life? Well, let's take a look at it. You might right now be thinking, okay, Henry and Rachel, I believe you, I can do this, but can I pay for it? Now, first of all, disclaimer, none of us on this call are financial advisors. We are just giving you basic information about what's out there. So we are not telling you what you have to do. What you can do is what we're here to talk about. At the moment, you may feel a bit like Mario here. He's in the news this week, right? Expending a lot of energy and taking big risks, but chasing nickels and dimes. It doesn't have to be that way. Here's some advice on how to secure the financial help you need to make sure college is a good investment. So first, the basics. Let's talk about types of financial aid. Broadly, there are 2 categories. There are grants and loans, and then there are scholarships. How are these different? Grants and loans are need-based. That means you don't have to prove you deserve them. You have to prove you need them. And the biggest provider of grants and loans is, drumroll, the federal government. To apply for it, and again, this is just to establish eligibility. You don't have to accept anything. You need 2 links. The first of these will take you to the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, which is a long process that's based on your tax returns. You do need a good long time to get it done right. The FAFSA becomes available each October. Now, this was a change about 6 or 7 years ago. So if You were doing this back in your high school days and it's been longer than that. This is a big change. The FAFSA becomes available in October of every year for the school year that starts the following fall. So if I were applying for college this fall, FAFSA could be done right now. If I'm applying for college in fall of 2024, the FAFSA I need to complete will become available this October, and it will be based on last year's taxes. Okay, so in theory, if you've completed your taxes for 2022, then by October, you can jump right into the FAFSA for next year. The second link there, you'll need a lot less often. It takes you to your FSA ID, which is one of the things you need to prove you are who you are when you go to the FAFSA site. Now, scholarships, they are in fact merit-based. That means you do have to earn them or at least qualify for them. The biggest provider of scholarships are the colleges themselves. Look at their websites. If you're not sure yet where you're applying, make it part of your search criteria to apply to schools that offer good scholarship packages. You might find opportunities that are offered by companies, nonprofits, and other organizations too. Anyone who has a vested interest in getting you the education you need. More on that in a minute. You might recall that financial aid resources for adult learners are different than they are for traditional students. So you're going to want to find out if the schools you're interested in are offering scholarships specific to adult learners. And if you're currently employed, see if your company offers tuition reimbursement or other types of aid and scholarships. As you'll see on this next slide, a lot of them do. Some of the nation's biggest employers, as you'll see on the screen popping up here, and of course, many of the smaller ones too, offer tuition help. These are companies that you interact with every day, might even work for. Might be good ones to apply to work for if you're planning to work your way through college. So think about looking into your current employer if you have one, or any potential future employers to see if they might offer you something that's going to help you get through school. This is nowhere near a full list. These are just some of the more recognizable ones that are known for doing it. So while you're most likely to get big financial help from either the government or university or your employer, there is one other place to look. And that's special organizations and nonprofits that are actively looking for college students to support. Here are some of those. There are many others. Rather than give you an exhaustive list of everywhere you can look, this is a good place to start. And what I really want to give you is a few do's and don'ts of how to use these types of search engines. I'll start with the don'ts. What you don't want to do when you go to these sites is rely on what I like to think of as your name in the hat scholarships. You literally don't do anything except put in your name and email address, and then eventually they hold a lottery for some not terribly large sum of money that they award to a few of the people who put their names in that hat. Do those, that's fine. Just know you're probably getting on an email mailing list when you do it, but you're probably not going to pay for all of your school with those. Second, don't do the opposite. Don't rely exclusively on those super high dollar value ones that are, unless they're absolutely ideally suited for you. When I used to advise high school students, they would come to me and say things like, "Hey, Mr. Price, here's a scholarship for the rest of my life if I do this. Should I do this?" And I would look at it, I'm like, you're welcome to, but you might notice that in order to qualify for this scholarship, you basically have to have a fully Hollywood style produced movie about yourself. So if you want to make that part of your next couple of years of your life, feel free. You probably are also going to want to rely on some other options along the way, right? Because if you put all your eggs in that one basket, statistically, it's not super likely that it's going to work out. The third don't is when you use these search engines, don't just rely on the first handful of results you see. You will get results that were promoted, not necessarily the ones that are the best fit for you. So it's like a lot of other search engines. You kind of have to go through the first few knowing, well, it's not necessarily these are bad results, but they were promoted by the company that put them there rather than the search engine actually thinking they're ideal for me. So be careful. 3 things you should do when using these search engines. Do apply for scholarships you're certain you're eligible for. So take a look at the requirements, age, current education level, specific to your interests, things that you're likely to actually get, right? Second, do. Put in the work to write essays or complete other logistical pieces of the puzzle for the mid-range scholarships. Think, things in the $1,000 to $10,000 range, specifically because a lot of people won't. I've had a lot of students come to me and say, well, here's this one for like $2,500, but I have to write an essay. Do you think it's worth it? Like, okay, let's think about this. How long is it going to take you to write an essay? Maybe the day? Okay, it might take you the full 8-hour day to write and edit and feel good about the essay that you've written. For that day, there's a decent chance you're going to get $2,500. I don't know about you, but that's the best hourly rate for a day's work I will ever get. So yeah, it's actually worth doing the work to get some of the scholarships that look kind of like a pain, like, oh, I got to do all this stuff. I got to research things. I got to write. That's not really my favorite thing. A lot of people are reacting that way, which means if you do put in the work, the odds of you getting it go way, way up. And finally, the do is to have someone help you with these essays. Just like we said with the college essays, get a proofreader or editor, someone who'll keep you honest to the deadlines and the facts that you're saying about yourself, especially if you feel like I'm not a great writer, I'm not great with deadlines, get help. You're going to want to help with this kind of stuff. All right, so again, financial aid can be tough, but it is worth the effort it takes to get any help you can get. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Rachel.
Thanks, Henry. Going back to school can be one of the most rewarding, life-changing experiences you'll ever have. History is filled with amazing stories of lives reinvented. But just because you're ready, just because you're excited, doesn't mean you're not worried. And the truth is, there's only so much you can plan for. Life is going to happen. The important thing to remember is that you're not alone. The school has resources and all the support you need. All you have to do is ask. Some examples you can get for resources include Wi-Fi access, gas cards, financial aid assistance, tutoring, flexible scheduling, test out options. You can't stop life from happening, but if you know what resources you have available to you, you can be ready for anything. One of the biggest worries I think people have, how much time will school actually take? There are a lot of factors. According to federal guidelines, 1 college credit hour reasonably approximates 1 hour of classroom learning plus 2 hours of independent work. That means for the average 3 credit course, you can expect to spend around 3 hours in the classroom, 6 hours of studying or doing homework every week for each class. That sounds like a lot, especially when you start multiplying that by 2, 3, 4 classes each semester. But remember, you can adjust your enrollment to your time availability. You're in the driver's seat with your education and you have control. Full-time means taking at least 12 credit hours each semester. There are some benefits to full-time classes. Sometimes it can be less expensive to do full-time. Financing options are more readily available. And sometimes just by virtue of finishing faster, you have fewer hours away from work, less commute costs, less childcare, etc. But it really depends on your personal situation. There's definitely something to be said for finishing sooner. And if that's your goal, summer and winter semesters are a great way to expedite graduation because those will actually pick your track up a little bit even faster. But full-time isn't for anyone and everyone. So don't be afraid to consider part-time. Part-time means taking less than 12 credit hours each semester. So that's fewer than 4 classes each semester. This sort of a la carte style can be a really great choice for a working adult. Consider whether the rest of your life's schedule is flexible or predictable. The best part about part-time school is that your class schedule can be flexible even if the rest of your life isn't. And don't forget, these aren't permanent options, so you can always change your mind and change your schedule later on. Consider your family's schedule too. Your schooling will affect everyone in your life. Don't forget to involve them in your decisions. They'll also likely be your main support system as you go. So you want to make sure that your choices work for everyone in your life. If you're not sure what your bandwidth is, it's okay to start out slow because you can always add more classes later on. Don't be afraid to consider and lean on your support system because they benefit from your educational advancement too. As an adult learner, you may find some very interesting differences between you and your peers. Depending upon your age, some of your peers could be much younger than you, and you may find it challenging to navigate differences in communication style, dedication to your studies, even the way other students socialize and share study materials. Remember that some of them have never been anything but students, and you need to be patient. Try to appreciate their perspective and their youth. Most importantly, don't be daunted by the prospect of going back to school. Try to think of it as your next great undertaking. It's a temporary lifestyle change in the pursuit of a long-term goal. And with that, I will hand it back to Amy, who's got some great information for us on upcoming webinars in this subject.
Awesome. All right. So still to come, navigating the college experience, like I talked about at the very beginning of this webinar, and then navigating life after college. Those two are coming up. And then we're actually going to do another whole series on navigating college and the C.R.A.M that we're talking about experience for high school students. So it's a little different because it's, the traditional, as we were saying at the beginning, experience and what high school students need to think about when they're in 9th grade and 10th grade and 11th grade. And so you might have your own kids. You might be on this call and you might be interested in what they might be doing. So that's going to start in May. And you can find out more information about that soon. And so here are our social media pages, and I'm going to pass it back to Maxine for questions.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so if anybody does have any questions, feel free to drop those into the question box, and we'll be getting to those in just a second. While those are coming in, I did just want to mention again, definitely follow us on our social medias. Any of our upcoming webinars, you'll be able to find some more information about those through these platforms, and it's just going to be an easier way to keep track of all of that information. And then additionally, at our YouTube channel, which you can go to tutor.com/YouTube webinars, that is where you're going to be able to find all of our previous webinars on this topic and on a bunch of other topics as well. So definitely follow us there. And now while we're waiting for some more questions, there was one question that was asking about the letters of recommendations and if they have an expiration date and how often you should be refreshing your letters of recommendation.
That's a great question. I would say I don't know that they have an expiration date in any literal sense, but you do want to be mindful of a couple of things. First of all, did that letter that you might just have on file talk about the things that the college you're applying to actually wants to know about? So if you had a letter of recommendation from the last time you were a job hunter, it may be great, but it may be talking about things that are not directly related to what the college you're applying to is interested in, right? They may not be as interested in your technical expertise that'll help you get this one job as the recommendation was that was written back in the day. Another thing to consider too is, do they ask for anything specific? So when you look for letters of recommendation, they may say, the college that's asking for them might say something like, they have to come from one academic person and one professional person, right? And I'm just giving a random example, but you want to follow the directions really closely. So no matter how old you have something on file, if it fits the criteria and it says great things about you, and that person, if they followed up with a phone call, would still say good things about you, I'm sure it will be fine. Just make sure that it's applicable to what you're doing right now.
Okay, and that actually answers another question that came up, which was, can you use letters of recommendation from like job experience, a letter of recommendation for a job? So thank you so much. We have another question kind of about the application process, about how to find someone to help proofread or edit any of the applications, maybe the essays and so forth. Do you have any guidance on that?
I wouldn't say there's any rule about that, but clearly it needs to be somebody who has a strength that you might not have. So if grammar is not your thing, find somebody for whom grammar is the thing, right? That they can watch for some of the things you might have missed. If you just struggle in terms of like the format of the writing, or you're not sure you understand the prompt, ask somebody who's been to college recently. See if they wrote one that was similar. What did they say? How did they approach it? Just find out what, get people's help who can fill up any gaps that might exist for you. So like I said, grammar might not be your thing, or writing might not be your thing in general, or maybe you just are stumped. Like, I don't know what to say about myself, right? Other people are usually a lot more positive about us than we are about ourselves. So get some ideas from somebody who likes and respects you, and they might give you some great ideas. And if they're also willing to follow up and take a look at it and make sure that the way you've written it makes sense and tells the right kind of story, so much better.
May I just jump in? Do you mind,
Go for
Maxine, if
it.
I
Of
just add
course.
one thing? Thank you. To the letters of recommendation, I just want to add a small side note that currently in a lot of colleges' application process, it's automated or it's digital, the letter of recommendation process. So a lot of what you're going to find, especially in master's programs, is that the application itself will ask you for the email addresses of the people who will be providing your references, and the school will want to reach out to those people directly. So be prepared for that. And if that is the case, you might want to just contact your references, make sure you have their solid email address on file, and then give them a heads up and say, hey, just so you know, I just provided the contact information today to the school, and here's what they're going to be asking for. And a lot of times it's a survey, and then the option to attach a formal letter of recommendation is included in that.
All right. Thank you so much for that further information about that process. We did have another question about accredited schools versus non-accredited schools and what the difference was. Would any of you be able to clarify on that?
A little bit, and Rachel, Amy, feel free to jump in too. There are accrediting agencies. They're usually regional. So schools in the western part of the country might be accredited by WASC, which is the Western Association of Schools and Colleges. And there's an equivalent version of that in different parts of the country. So if accreditation is a concern, you could either look to see on the school's website what accreditations they have. If you don't find that, maybe do a search to find out, depending on the region your school is in, or depending on the type of school that it is, public or private, who should be accrediting them, right? If they are accredited, it would be by a certain combination of organizations, and then go look at their lists and see if the school you're interested in is on it.
And
I
accreditation
could
is very,
go
oh,
ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
No, you go, Rachel. You're next.
Okay, I'll go and then you go. I just
Okay.
want to add, accreditation can be very important depending upon the degree program that you're going into. For example, when I worked at a technical college, and we were accredited by 3 different governing bodies. There are always going to be different potential accreditations that a college can have. So you want to research, as Henry touched on, not just the college, but also the accrediting body that they have. And then the other thing to consider is, if you're going for a degree that requires also licensure, is the accreditation for that college compatible with the licensure? A great example of this is psychology and social work. A college can offer you a psychology degree, but that doesn't mean that they're accredited to give you licensure in conjunction with that degree. So make sure you're checking into all of those specifics for your chosen profession and your chosen degree before you commit to a college program.
That's good advice. And I just want to say that the point of accreditation is really to make sure that a university is aligning to certain standards, and that they are conforming to a certain standard for education. And I worked for a university that went through the accreditation process, and it's very difficult, timely, detailed process for a university to go through to prove that they are providing a good education to their students, that education can take them into whatever they want to go into. So I would say accreditation is very, very important. And you definitely need to really think hard if you would go to a school that isn't accredited. But then, like the other two said, both Henry and Rachel, that finding out who is accrediting the university or the college is also important. But most important, I think, is definitely really consider that you're going to a school that has to align itself with some. They can't just say like, oh, we are going to teach underwater basket weaving and give a degree for that, because who needs that, and who says that's a good degree and that's going to take you anywhere in your career. So you want schools that have to align themselves with a certain standard.
And that will, I just forgot one more thing that Amy made me think of, that will also impact your financing, because depending upon what type of
Yes.
financing you're going for, whether or not that college or university is accredited is going to have a huge difference there as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that answer and for all of the kind of feedback from all of you. It doesn't look like we have any other questions coming in. So before we end the webinar today, I just wanted to say, again, keep an eye out for that follow-up email. It will have a recording of this webinar as well as the slides for you to review if you need that, and some information about our upcoming webinars so that you can sign up. But thank you, Rachel, Henry, and Amy, so much for presenting today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for coming.
Thanks, Maxine. Thanks, everyone.
All right. I hope everybody has a great rest of their day.